Today, General Hospital will reveal Jason had reached the breaking point, the moment where love, loyalty, and heartbreak collided in the most painful way possible. He had no choice but to make the agonizing decision to walk away after realizing that Carly was completely blinded by her feelings for Brennan. No matter how many times he warned her, no matter how urgently he laid out the risks, Carly continued to defend a dangerous man, dismissing every shred of evidence with stubborn denial. She refused to believe Brennan could have been connected to the polonium poisoning that nearly claimed her life. Even more concerning, she couldn't admit that her vague, complicated entanglement with Brennan had pulled her into a world of shadows where every step could be her last. Jason, armed with years of hard-earned experience navigating the underworld and guided by a razor-sharp survival instinct, felt utterly powerless in the face of Carly's refusal to see the truth. He had stood helplessly as she was rushed to the hospital, her body weakened by the effects of a rare and lethal poison. The bottle of champagne she drank from, intended for Brennan, had been laced with polonium. A single night spent in Brennan's room had nearly become her last. And yet, even after surviving such a close brush with death, Carly refused to lay blame where it was due. She refused to acknowledge that Brennan's presence in her life was a liability, not a comfort. Jason had no illusions about Brennan. He understood that men like him didn't just walk away from power. The world Brennan came from, cloaked in espionage, subterfuge, and secrecy, was one where truth was fluid and loyalty was always conditional. Valentine may have been the one who poisoned the drink, but Jason knew that Carly had become a target simply because she was with Brennan. And what terrified him most was the idea that Brennan might still be secretly operating within the WSB, wielding influence behind the scenes while deceiving Carly into believing he was just a former agent trying to start over. Jason had always protected Carly, often at great personal cost. He had walked through fire for her, bled for her, and even sacrificed his freedom to keep her safe. But this time, she didn't want his protection. She saw his concern as interference, his instincts as paranoia. And that cut deeper than any physical wound ever could. Watching her brush aside his warnings and place her trust in a man who oozed manipulation and hidden motives was almost more than Jason could bear. Deep down, Jason wanted to believe that the woman he loved would see the truth before it was too late. But as days passed and her connection to Brennan grew stronger, that hope faded. Carly wasn't just ignoring the signs, she was willingly walking into the fire, convinced she would come out unscathed. Jason knew better. He had seen what that kind of fire could do, how it could burn away everything you thought you could control. The night before he walked away, Jason lingered outside Carly's place longer than he should have, battling with his heart and his judgment. He had tried everything, investigating Brennan's past, pressing Valentine for information, even confronting Carly head-on. But nothing worked. Her mind was made up. She believed in Brennan, and that belief would cost her. So, with the weight of 1,000 unsaid words crushing his chest, Jason made his choice. He told Carly that if she chose to keep Brennan in her life, then he could no longer be part of it. She broke down in tears, begging him not to leave, trying to reason with him, promising that Brennan wasn't the threat he believed. But Jason, for once, didn't waver. He looked her in the eyes and said the 7 words that would haunt them both: "You'll regret keeping Brennan in your life." There was no threat in his voice, only sorrow. He wasn't trying to scare her, he was simply stating the truth as he saw it. And though Carly didn't want to hear it, a part of her must have known he was right. Jason turned and walked away, knowing that this time, he might never come back. Carly was left standing in the silence, surrounded by the weight of what she'd lost, not just the man who had always stood by her side, but the last line of defense between her and a danger she still refused to understand. Brennan's secrets would unravel. The truth would come out, about Cyrus, about Jocelyn's involvement with the WSB, and about the lies Brennan had carefully buried. And when that day came, Jason wouldn't be there to catch her. She would fall alone. When Carly broke down in tears, her voice cracking with desperation as she begged Jason not to walk away, there was a flicker of pain in his eyes, but his resolve remained firm, unshaken. She reached for him with trembling hands, her emotions unraveling in a storm of panic and disbelief, pleading with him to stay, to reconsider, to understand. Her words came in rushed fragments, how much she needed him, how much she trusted his instincts even if she couldn't follow them this time, how their bond shouldn't be shattered over a man like Brennan. But Jason didn't move. He didn't soften. He had made his decision long before she uttered her first tearful plea. The man standing before her now wasn't the same Jason who used to take her side no matter the cost, who would cross any line, break any rule, and silence any enemy just to see her safe. That version of Jason had slowly been eroded, worn down by years of watching Carly gamble with her life, test the limits of loyalty, and now, defend someone he knew, with every instinct and every fact available, was a danger cloaked in charm. He wasn't cold out of anger. He was cold because it was the only way to protect himself from the pain of letting her go. His voice, when he finally spoke, was stripped of sentiment. It was calm, precise, cutting through the room like a blade. There was no hint of the warmth Carly had always relied on in his presence. No softness, no pleading. Just an unshakable truth. He looked her directly in the eyes, and there was no room for doubt in his expression. "If you choose Brennan," he said quietly, "then you're choosing a future I can't walk beside you in." The words hit Carly like a slap to the soul. Her breath hitched as she tried to deny it, to undo it, but Jason had already made peace with the pain of this separation. He had done everything in his power to keep her from falling into this trap. But her faith in Brennan was a choice, a dangerous, reckless choice, and Jason knew he couldn't save someone who refused to see the cliff's edge just inches away. The room seemed to shrink around them, heavy with the weight of years of shared history, of love that had outlasted betrayal, marriages, death, and resurrection. And now, it would all end, not with a gunshot, not with an explosion, but with 7 quiet, devastating words. "You'll regret keeping Brennan in your life." Jason didn't raise his voice. He didn't accuse her. It wasn't a threat, it was a bitter prophecy from the one man who had stood by her through everything. The one man who had seen the pattern repeat itself over and over again. She always believed she could handle the danger. She always thought she could bend fate to her will. But this time, Jason knew, Brennan wasn't just another mistake. He was the kind of mistake that would leave permanent scars. Carly's tears kept falling, but Jason didn't reach out to wipe them away. That chapter, the one where he rushed to her side no matter what, was over. She had made her choice, and Jason, for the first time, made one of his own. He turned toward the door, and for a moment, time stood still. Carly's sobs echoed behind him, raw and helpless, but Jason didn't look back. The man who had always come back for her, who had been her shadow, her sword, her silent strength, walked away. And as the door closed behind him, Carly was left with nothing but silence, the taste of regret already forming on her tongue, and the haunting echo of words she would come to understand too late. After delivering his final, crushing words, Jason turned and walked away, silent, composed, and heartbreakingly resolute. He didn't glance back, didn't pause at the doorway, didn't allow himself one last look at the woman who had once meant everything to him. Every step he took away from her felt like tearing open a wound he had kept closed for years, but he knew that staying would only prolong the inevitable. Walking away wasn't just about severing ties with Carly, it was about protecting what was left of himself. He had given her everything he had, over and over again, and now, with his instincts screaming that disaster was coming, he had no choice but to remove himself from the path of destruction. It wasn't punishment. It was self-preservation. There was a heavy finality in the air as the door clicked shut behind him, as if the chapter they had shared, filled with devotion, chaos, sacrifice, and fierce loyalty, had just slammed closed with no promise of reopening. Jason had walked out of Carly's life before, but never like this. This time, it wasn't because of duty or danger or death. This time, it was because she chose someone else's truth over his, someone else's promises over the history they had built together. And Jason, for the first time in his life, couldn't fight for her anymore. Inside the room, the silence was deafening. Carly stood frozen for a long moment, the echo of his footsteps still ringing in her ears. The strength that usually radiated from her, the fire, the defiance, the unwavering confidence, was gone. It crumbled beneath the weight of what had just happened. Her knees gave way, and she sank onto the nearest chair, unable to breathe through the storm building in her chest. The tears that followed were not just for Jason's absence, but for something far deeper. It was the realization that something sacred had broken between them, something she might never get back. The room, once warm with shared memories and fierce arguments turned reconciliations, now felt colder than she had ever known. She stared at the closed door, hoping irrationally that it might open again, that Jason might come back, that he might reconsider. But he didn't. And in that stillness, Carly felt the full weight of her isolation. Her tears fell freely, unchecked, dripping onto her hands as she pressed them to her face in anguish. The pain in her chest was more than heartbreak, it was the dull, persistent ache of realization. She hadn't just lost Jason. She had driven him away. And the worst part was, a quiet voice deep inside her, one she had been ignoring, whispered that he might have been right all along. There was something about Brennan, something she didn't fully understand but had convinced herself she could handle. But now, as she sat alone, surrounded by shadows and echoes of Jason's absence, Carly couldn't shake the gnawing unease that had taken root inside her. She remembered his eyes, so full of love once, now clouded with disappointment, and the way his voice had dropped when he delivered those final, haunting words. She would regret keeping Brennan in her life. At the time, she had resisted, had pushed back with every ounce of defiance she had left. But now, in the solitude of that empty room, the certainty in Jason's voice replayed in her mind like a warning tolling in the distance. And for the first time, Carly wondered if her belief in Brennan, her stubborn need to trust her own instincts, would be her undoing. Because Jason had never abandoned her, not truly, not ever. Until now. And that, more than anything, told her just how real the danger had become. Carly remained oblivious to the full extent of the secrets Brennan was hiding, and the depth of the web he had spun around her life. Beneath his charming facade and calculated reassurances lay connections far darker than she could imagine, ties that reached directly into the heart of Cyrus Renault's criminal empire in the deepest, most classified corridors of the WSB. Brennan's past, wrapped in layers of deception and half-truths, was far from dormant. He hadn't just left that world behind, he was still entangled in it, operating in shadows, pulling strings behind closed doors. And yet, Carly refused to see it. Unbeknownst to her, Brennan's quiet communications and carefully timed absences weren't coincidences, they were indicators of ongoing covert operations, manipulations that could unravel lives, especially those of the people Carly loved. The most damning of all were the secrets Brennan kept regarding her daughter, Jocelyn. Through WSB channels and undisclosed files, Brennan had access to information that involved Jocelyn directly, details about her recruitment, assignments, and the dangerous role she might unknowingly be playing in a larger scheme. All of it was a ticking time bomb. Every piece of withheld information, every lie wrapped in charisma, every evasive answer Brennan had given was one step closer to a future Carly couldn't yet see. But it was coming. The detonation was inevitable. And when that moment arrived, when the truth finally ripped through the calm surface of her life, Carly would be the one left picking up the pieces. Alone. In her heart, the truth still hovered just out of reach, veiled by the haze of infatuation and the desperate hope that this man, this new chapter, could offer stability where chaos had once ruled. But that hope, so blinding and persistent, was built on a fragile foundation. Her unwavering trust in Brennan was not strength. It was denial. An emotional escape from the harsher reality Jason had tried so desperately to show her. Carly didn't realize that by defending Brennan, she wasn't just risking her own safety, she was gambling with the future of her daughter, her family, and everyone caught in the ripple effect of Brennan's concealed agenda. The man she clung to was not the shield she imagined him to be, but a storm in disguise. And the longer she refused to see it, the closer she edged to devastation. Jason had known. He had tried to warn her. He had stood at her side, pleaded with her to see reason, to understand that Brennan was a threat, not a savior. But she hadn't listened. And now, Jason was gone, not out of spite, but out of sorrow and necessity. He had walked away with a shattered heart and the grim knowledge that the woman he loved was walking straight into danger. And with his departure, something inside Carly broke. It wasn't just the absence of his presence, it was the gaping void left by his unconditional loyalty, the steady force that had always pulled her back from the edge. Jason hadn't just walked away. He had taken with him a piece of her soul, a piece she would never get back. And now, for the first time in a long time, Carly was truly alone. She stood on the precipice of a future she didn't yet understand, surrounded by illusion and false promises, while the truth waited like a blade behind the curtain. The storm Jason foresaw was gathering, silent but relentless. And Carly, blinded by emotion, remained unaware that everything she believed in was about to be torn apart.